Okay, well, hi everyone again. Today we're going to talk. So, as you know, this is the third time that we meet as part of this collaborative and initiative on social norms and learning about social norms and how understanding how social norms, what they are, how we can diagnose them, how they change, and how they can be measured. Understanding all these things can help you achieve the results that you hope to see in the field. So before, just as a recap, can I just ask if there is anyone who hasn't been to either of the previous sessions? So is anyone new at all today?
Yes, please. Hajara is new. I've been on the field during the previous two sections. I've just been able to get the materials and go through the materials, but this is the first time I'm on the live section.
Great, but you had the chance to. Oh, great, thank you. I'm glad that you had a chance to review the material. Thank you, Hajara. Anyone else? Anyone else new?
Yeah, Caroline Enier here with Global Affairs Canada. This is my first live event.
Thank you, Caroline. Nice to see you here. Yeah, Modupe?
Yes, so I am not completely new. I think this is my second live session. But I have followed up with the yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. And everyone else has been on slides before. Okay, this is just to kind of understand the extent to which the language and things that we will be using today are accessible to everyone. So obviously, I would just give you a definition of social norms just as a recap. Today is not about what social norms are. Today is not about how do we diagnose social norms. Today is about what has worked in the past to facilitate social norms change. But just to make sure everyone is on the same page, just remember that we use a definition of social norms from social psychology. So psychology of society. Psychology, the psychology bit is that social norms are beliefs. And the society bit is that these norms are beliefs about what society does. And more precisely, we use this definition of social norms coming from a particular group of thinkers, by which social norms are one, beliefs about what others do, and two, beliefs about what others approve of and disapprove of. And to be a little, if you want to be extremely precise, beliefs about the extent to which others approve of something, right? So that allows a little bit of space to break black and white stuff. So that the social norm wouldn't be people approve full stop, but people approve very much of these, people disapprove very much of that. And the more they approve or disapprove of, the more that can have an influence on my own actions. That's what we said the first week, and then in the first seminar, and then in the second webinar, we discussed the assessment, and we discussed its process, the process of identification of norms exists, and the extent to which these norms affect behavior or action, people practices and actions within a group. Oh, my Zoom is acting out a little bit. We also discussed, you were with Rebecca, we also discussed some techniques, and some of these techniques were interviews with vignettes to uncover the reaction to a fictional story, and other techniques include the technique of the whys, and then if you look at, if you've looked at the documents, you will have seen that there are also opportunities to diagnose social norms through participatory techniques, as well as more quantitative techniques, which you will be looking at in the next webinar. So as I mentioned, multiple methods: interview, vignettes, ranking, exercises, focus groups, surveys. And you were probably, I know you were presented the SNEP, which has been developed by the Learning Collaborative that originated from Georgetown University. And it's 5 steps, which kind of recall the work that has, and the SNEP evolves from work that we did together previously, in that it invites people to plan and prepare the diagnostic, the identification work, to identify reference groups, to explore their social norms, analyze the finding, and then apply the findings. So once you are at step 5, once you know which norms are relevant for your work, once you know which groups are sustain these norms, and as you will have learned by now, you know that geographical proximity doesn't necessarily immediately translate into being a group. Or in other words, you can be in a village with 500 people, and yet you don't care about what these 500 people think about vaccinating your children. You only care about what elder women of your own, of the same ethnic group as you think about vaccinating children. So identifying reference group is very important. And then once you have an idea of which social norms are active in this group, and you have analyzed the findings, how do we transform these findings into possible interventions, and which interventions exist out there in the literature that can inform our own actions? And this is really what we are going to do and discuss today. We're going to discuss 4 types of interventions that have been used in the past to change social norms. Now, before we move into the actual, let's say, the intervention facilitated change, if that's something different from the natural change, but let's create this false difference for a second. Let's say that some change happens naturally and some change happens as a result of an intervention. To be honest with you, that's a little secret. Don't go around and tell it to everybody. I don't even think these 2 things are so separate, but for a second, let's pretend they are. So social norms are not written in stone, and through time, they change as a response to many things. They change. I'm sure when you think about Nigeria, when you think about the last 15 to 20 years, well, I'm not an expert in Nigeria, but I do know that there was a huge change in the economic and social structures because of the discovery of oil and how the oil was managed. And I'm sure we could look at that and see how that immediate availability of oil and the influx of money change some norms. That's one example. If we wanted to go even deeper, I'm sure we could look at how colonization process, the British coming to Nigeria with the destructive and reckless, as part of the destructive and reckless colonization process that plagued the largest part of the world. I'm sure that we could see how that changed some of the norms that existed in place. Now, neither the discovery of oil or the British colonists were intended to change social norms, but because there was a change in the political and social and economic structures, certain things became acceptable and certain things became less acceptable. Here's some examples from the history that I know of. On the top and left-hand side, you see a woman smoking in a restaurant. This changed through time, and it changed, and we will see in a second how it changed. On just below, you see a family of people from the US being on their phone. The father has got a remote for the TV. The mother is talking on the phone, and the 2 children are probably texting. That was something, when I was young, it was absolutely not imaginable to be distracted from the dinner. But today, when you're out with a friend, it has become a little bit more acceptable to say, oh, sorry, I just need to respond to this text very quickly. In the middle, you see a woman from France in the 1800s. Women used to wear these corsets, and then which will make the waist very thin. This was just abandoned. It was then considered unhealthy. And then on the right-hand side, this is an example that Anthony Appiah, of Ghanaian or origin, working at Princeton, often does. This is the honor duels. So when your honor was offended, as a man, you were expected to challenge someone at a death duel, and this just went away. Now, how did these things went away? Well, they didn't go away just because somebody said, you know, it's bad to smoke in the restaurant, or they didn't go away because somebody told these men, you know, it's bad that you kill each other. So in other words, it wasn't just new knowledge being given to these people that achieved new behavior. Despite that, and that was almost makes us laugh thinking about men being told, oh, you know, it's not so good that you kill each other, and then just saying, oh, okay, thank you very much. Despite the fact that the theory seems very understandable, a lot of programs today are still designed around the focus on imparting people new knowledge, forgetting material resources aside for a second. The idea that just tell people the right thing to do and they do it, with some projects also acknowledging that we need to look into some more psychological constructs such as attitudes. So today, in this new era of international development and global health, we know that actually there are many things and many factors that contribute to change. One thing that we know of is that when there is a, call it whatever you like, critical mass, tipping point, peer pressure. Anyway, we know that when a lot of people are changing and a lot of people are witnessing that change, the observers will also change. And well, we have some examples here, but again, you can think of examples from your own history and reality. But this is really at the core. In the end, this is really what social norm change boils down to. It's not enough for people to change. That's the first piece. But the second critical piece is that that change must be witnessed and talked about. So, of course, certain norms might take longer, certain norms might take less time to change. Was very interesting. One question that I always get at this point is, okay, but wait a second. Well, some people tell me, what's the right percentage of people that need to change? And Centola has done some experiments around it. He says 25%. But what's even more interesting is, what do you do when it's a very small percentage of the population? So it's not, so in other words, what does enough here mean, right? It's easy when you have 60% of the population changing, everyone sees that. But what about when you have 10%? Well, what's interesting is that a lot of natural experiments, a few natural experiments have shown that even if you have 10%, if that group is growing over time and people understand that that group is growing over time, then others will follow. So say that you have more people abandoning child marriage or more people vaccinating their children, is 5% in 2010, is 10% in 2015, is 20% in 2020. Well, that growth, even though it's not 60%, but the fact that that group is expanding rapidly, and others are made aware that the group is expanding rapidly, might be enough. So those are just a few slides of theory before we look at the actual intervention, 4 different types of actual interventions from the past that have worked in changing norms. And then obviously, all these the interventions that I'm about to present were successful because they looked at social norms as one, they kind of worked with social norms as one of the factors achieving change in among the factors affecting people's practices. And that's something that you really need to ask yourself as you design your interventions. You need to ask yourself, okay, I want to work on social norms, but how do these social norms, and because it's fundamental and it's an often forgotten piece in international development, but how are they sustaining or sustained by other institutional factors, material factors, social factors, individual factors? So if we go back to that slides with all the pictures that I showed you before, if we think about smoking, how did the social norms come to change? Well, the terrain, the field was prepared by the discovery that the smoking was actually very bad for your health. And I'm just thinking about the cigarette I smoked an hour ago. But then it came also the fact that cigarettes were banned from TVs and movies. And then it came the fact that the price of cigarettes increased. And then it came the fact that a law was passed that you weren't supposed to be smoking in restaurants anymore. Now, today, of course, if you light on a cigarette in this restaurant, the first thing that you will be worried about before your health, before getting fined, but the first thing that you'll be worried about is, but what will people around me say, right? So now the norm is really rigid, keeping this in place in Italy, for instance. But the norm came to change with a little bit of time. Okay, let's bite these social norm strategies. As I said, I'll show you 4 strategies. The first is law and policies. The second is mass media. But actually, before we go, the third is is normative feedback, and the fourth is group discussions. Before we go into this, I just want to make sure that what I said so far makes sense, or is there anyone who has a comment or a question on what I said so far?
And feel free to unmute yourself or type into the chat box if you have a question at this point.
Thank you, Meredith. And for as much as I'd like to believe that your silence is a sign of me being perfectly clear and eloquent, I'm sure some of the things I said are not. So please don't worry. And if there's no question that is not worth asking if you have it. Okay, unless that was an attempt to say something, I'll move on. And we can always go back to this. Okay, so 4 strategies to change social norms. I usually prefer to say to facilitate change in social norms, because I don't like the idea of social engineering and designing society and an NGO designing how society should be. I believe that there is, and these 4 strategies are exactly on the same point. I believe there are always people on your side, right? Whatever you want to achieve. So the question is, how do we amplify the voice of those people? So the first example of doing that is the example from Antanas Mokus. Antanas Mokus was a professor, and is a professor and an academic. He became the mayor of Medellin. He helped Bogota, Medellin in Colombia with a variety of very complex problems. Just to give you some examples, the things that he worked on were the fact that a lot of people were consuming too much water. They were consuming too much electricity. There were too many weapons around. Streets were not safe for women. People were not paying taxes. And he used the social norms approach to change people's practices one by one. And I can tell you a little bit about that later. But the example I want to tell you, because to me is the funniest one, is that he had a lot of traffic accidents. So people were driving like mad. This was in Bogota. People were driving like mad. And he was asked, what can we do about it? And he said, well, let's change some policies around here. So what did he do? So he had a little bit of a problem, and this is well, maybe this slide now kind of spoils my question, but he had a little bit of a problem. Nobody cared about breaking traffic rules because the police officers were all corrupt, right? So yes, the fine was whatever, say $50, whatever that is. But people didn't care because with $2, you could just corrupt the police officers and go away with it. So what he did, he fired all corrupt officers and he replaced them with mimes, okay? And I'll tell you a little bit about it in a second, but let's watch this video. And I hope you can hear the audio. Meredith, you tell me if the audio is not, if you can hear it, okay?
Sure. Yeah, we can hear it.
Yo recuerdo que cuando él empezó, inventó los mimos, la prensa se reía de Artanas.
De estos largos y oscuros túneles ubicados bajo el centro de Bogotá, se preparan 20 jóvenes que pretenden enseñarles a los habitantes de la ciudad cómo vivir civilizadamente en una capital.
Es a través del arte, ¿sí? A través de nuestra postura de la estética y de la ética, vamos a poner en servicio nuestro trabajo para dar educación ciudadana.
Creo que la disposición a dejarse corregir es el complemento que espero frente a los mimos. O sea, los mimos solos no bastan. Ahora necesitamos que la gente acepte al mimo.
Okay. So, as I said, he fired the corrupt traffic police officers as a signal of strong institutional commitment. He had a dramatic success in terms of visibilization, but replication, of course, cannot happen just through copy and paste it. But it wasn't just a show, that's the whole point. So as I said before, there is always someone in the population who agrees with you. The point is how much voice these people have, how many opportunities do they have to express their opinion, and how much is are their voices and opinions heard by others. By putting mimes in the streets, what Mockus was doing was allowing people who agreed that there were too many traffic officers to speak to each other and say, oh, yeah, this mime things is silly, but I'm really tired and sick of how people drive. And if you tell me this, next time you're in my car, I'll think, oh, wait a second, this is what she or he, this is what they think about me. So maybe I should be a little bit more careful. The effect was dramatic. So Bogota was traditionally having more traffic-related accidents than the average of the country, and it went much down. It was an 8-year commitment, though. And just to give you some more examples, he passed another policy in which he said, it's now people who want to voluntarily pay 120% of their taxes, they are allowed to. Now, nobody paid more taxes than they were supposed to, but people started talking about it. They started saying, can you believe that there are so many people who don't pay their taxes, and there are now, the government is asking us to pay more? So the result was that nobody paid 120, but many more people paid 100% of what they were supposed to pay. So this is just an example of laws and policies. I'll give you another couple of examples before we go into the breakout session to discuss laws and policies. Another example was doing Thursday night. He passed a law by which Thursday night was women's night out. And men were supposed, he said, that way men can stay out and take care of the children. I think it was Thursday night, or it doesn't matter the day of the week. But that changed gender over time, that contributed to changing gender norms around what can fathers do, right? So women started saying, well, you were fantastic staying with a child on Thursday night. So you see, you are capable of doing it. Or another example was he did, well, I'll stop there for a second. So I'd like for us to break up in 10 minutes and discuss what experiences and thoughts do you have on how laws and policies can contribute to changing social norms? The Mockus example is a dramatic one, but think about the smoking in restaurant law, or think about laws and policies that you have witnessed at changing norms. When do you think, when you think about your own work, how visible is this strategy? How to what extent can this strategy help you? Rather than visible, how effective could this strategy be, and how useful? So we'd like to facilitate just a quick discussion. You'll be sent in breakout sessions, and we'll be coming back here in 10 minutes.
All right. I think I'm going to create 2 breakout rooms for now. And I'm going to send everyone, and we'll be back here in 10 minutes.
And I know that Hasbiala, Alodimeji, Foy, Ajara, Martin, they're definitely working in Nigeria.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Amal from Nigeria. I can't recall seeing any, so I don't know if my fellow citizens can recall seeing any, but I can't. Thank you.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Well, for us, like the projects under which I actually work, we work in mostly remote communities, and most laws that are most changes that we're trying to achieve are kind of driven from the community rather than the kind of the bottom top kind of intervention, in the sense that cultural norms that affect especially the women and girls in the communities kind of advocated on, and trying to see changes. I can just think of few in terms of like gender-based violence in some of the communities where women kind of train and capacity builds on what kind of violence or harmful practices, like in some communities where we work, where there were issues of harmful widowhood practices, and through kind of a series of meetings and capacity buildings, some of those norms were reduced, in the sense that places where women more 4 months or 6 months be able to kind of have it reduced, some to a month, some to 3 weeks, but these women are still engaging in economic activities which are things that were not done initially, because then once the woman is in seclusion, she's not expected to work, she's not expected to go out, but still yet she's expected to feed her family. And that was kind of posing untold hardship on widows in the communities. So those are the kind of work I do where I work. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ajara. So you said, if I understand this right, you're saying that the laws around gender-based violence, they contributed to change norms about the role of women in the family. Is that right?
Yes, there are roles, and if, for instance, a woman lost her husband, they are kind of there's what they call the mourning period in Nigeria, where women are kind of in seclusion. They're not expected to kind of engage themselves in any economic activity, but still yet this woman is expected to feed, for instance, if she has children, feed her children and do some other kind of separation rights in some communities where we work. So we're able to work with these women, and even with the institutions within the communities, especially the traditional institutions, because they are the custodian of culture and norms in Nigeria. So we, through our work, we're able to reduce some of these periods that the women live in seclusion, and also to advocate for them to begin an economic activity irrespective of losing your husband. Because when you don't work, there is no way you can feed your family. So those are the things that I
Thank you, Hajara. Anyone else? maybe someone, you could also offer an example of when the opposite happened, when laws and policies didn't manage to change social norms, and we could discuss the why.
Maybe Ben, if I could just come in there. I mean, I think, again, gender-based violence is actually a really good example of this. So the Violence Against Persons Prohibition Bill was passed in 2016, I think. And it hasn't fundamentally changed norms around gender-based violence, let's say the federal level. And I think, you know, Nigeria is a very good example of where we have beautiful laws and policies, but it's the implementation of those that are lacking. And I think one of the interesting things about the passage of the law is to look at what matters to individuals. So the average man in the household, so there's a law passed that is government, maybe I don't support them, or they've just done it to look good, but it doesn't actually, it's not a strong influence on his thinking. And it's not enough, because there's a law in place, there's really, it's not enough to convince him to change. So I think that's one example of where it really hasn't had an impact from my perspective. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
I wonder.
I have another example.
Yes, please, Martin.
Martin.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. The other example I have is at a point they formed Nigeria government formed an organization they call Federal Road Safety Corporation, just for road traffic accidents. And then, of course, there were guidelines on how they were to walk, but it wasn't working, especially with long distance, you know, these coaches, they call them luxurious buses in Nigeria. They had challenges with these people. And the reason was obvious, you know, they were over speeding because they would travel from the east to the west to Lagos, and sometimes want to return back same day, over 24 hours. So just for the money, because of the money. And so the initial plan was, okay, you pay. Once you are caught, you pay some money. And then, of course, the money they were making was so much that they just pay. And they didn't change things. But at some point, what they did was they now started detaining them. So if they catch any of the drivers over speeding, no problem. You don't have to pay. They take them to their office, and they spend time. They go through all the driving guidelines. They watch videos of safety, and just to keep them back there for hours. And then that brought about some change. Unfortunately, it wasn't, they didn't persist in that practice long enough for us to see the full effect. Over.
Thank you, Martin. So in the last couple of minutes, one thing to reflect on is the advantage of the policies that Marcus passed is that he allowed, they were so crazy in a way and unusual, not harmful, but unusual, that they allowed people to talk about things. Because who puts mimes instead of police officers, right? So the learning lesson here is that he allowed for those who didn't like the harmful practice to have an opportunity and express the fact that they didn't like the harmful practice. In your case, Martin, I wonder if we could have devised for Nigeria a way for passengers to recognize which drivers were doing back and forth and which drivers were instead only doing one way, and choose the drivers that only did one way. I don't know, just as an example, maybe a policy passing that the van will be painted of a given color. I don't know. We will need, this is not a 30-second conversation, but that's just an idea. Okay, now we will go back to the plenary, to the main room in 15 seconds, where we will look at the second type, beyond laws and policies. But remember, if you work on laws and policies, if you do lobby for policy, it's not just about the law and the policy, it's about giving voices and amplifying the voices of the diffident to strengthen the injunctive norms.
I want to ask, like in Nigeria, where policies are passed at the federal and domestication at the states is a problem. How can we tackle that?
I think that's a really good question. I think maybe you should put it in the chat box or ask when we get back to the main session, because I think now people are clicking on the box to go back.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Ajara.
Okay, well, while people keep joining from the other breakout room, one key point that came out in our breakout room was that, importantly, the law and the policy alone won't change the norm unless the law and the policy create space for the dissidents, for those who don't like the harmful practice, to speak out. So creates opportunities for people to talk, so that, remember the key point, enough people start seeing that enough people are against the harmful practice, starts feeling that people are not complying with the harmful practice anymore. The second example I want to talk to you, and we'll have another breakout session after this, is the mass media approach, where the media approach shares information about the harmful effect of the practice, but also focus more on the fact that the population is abandoning the practice, and on the stigma that comes with sticking to the old practice. One quite famous example, I'll show you one example that my colleagues from the LSHTM have created. This is a small ad, was done by my colleague Val Curtis and Bob Ongman in Ghana to increase hand washing by increasing the injunctive norm that people around you would approve of you more if you practice hand washing. Oh, and there usually is a funny music, but not in this case. Well, so I'll tell you the story. So you see this guy needs to go to the bathroom. Here's where, so it's funny because of course you want the audience to listen. The guy runs to the bathroom. He has a huge problem. Everyone is out there chatting. He comes out of the bathroom after he's done what he needed to do. He's very happy. Everyone is looking at him, and that's very important, right? Everyone sees what you're doing, and he just rubs his hands like this and walks away. And everyone disapproves of that, right? Oh, that's disgusting. And nobody wants to shake his hand. And then there is very strong symbol. You see that he's isolated by the others. Everyone stands away from it. And then here's the information. Here's the knowledge piece. You know, here's another guy who also went to the bathroom, but he washes his hands. Here's also knowledge. Frame on the soap, because it's important to use soap. He washes his hands, and the others look at him as well. And now they're smiling. There's a little beep sound as he comes out of that, and he smells his hands. And our hero, he sees everyone shaking his hands, and he starts having doubts. He says, oh, wait a second, maybe that's the reason why they weren't shaking my hands. And all of a sudden, he also washes his hands with soap. The music is quite tense right now. He smells his hands. He also has this BBB sound. He gives his hand. Is this really what this is about, or they hate me? And of course, this was about. You see, they shake hands, and everyone is happy. Now the music has become very, very happy. Everyone is smiling. Everyone is happy. And what's interesting at the end, you see you see you will see people shaking hands between each other. We also gives, you see, like these two men, these two women, and then children, which also gives some information about the transmission of germs. And then the final frame is respect people, use soap, wash hands. So it's not, oh, don't get people sick, but it taps onto what in this case in Ghana, the formative research said was an important value. So you need to do it for the others. So you see, what this video is saying is, if you don't wash your hands, people will stay away from you. People are watching, people are looking at you. If you want to respect them, which is a basic value, then use soap and wash your hands. Okay, any comments on this little video I showed you? I'd like to hear if anyone has got any ideas, any reactions to the video. Did you like it? Did you enjoy it? It's unfortunate there was no audio, but I don't know why. What did you think?
I have an observation.
Yes, please.
Yeah, it's a very nice video, straight shots to the point. But I think something they miss is good to have behavior change, but it's good to have the right behaviors. The way the hand washing was depicted in that video is not correct. They are supposed to lather, with the soap on the hand for some time before they start rinsing with water. But when people watch this, they get the wrong attitude, and it won't prevent against infection. Over.
Thank you, Martin. So that's a very good point. Let's make sure the positive representation is accurate. Yeah?
Okay, I was just going to say that one thing that struck me about the ad was how social acceptance is such a big factor in terms of changing attitudes and norms. Simply because the guy wanted to be, accepted, hugged, shook, smiled at. He was willing to, inconvenience himself, in quotes, to pick up this new behavior. So he's accepted by the community. I think that's a very important driver of social change. Over.
Thank you, Adenike. So I have Ado and Foye. May I suggest, sorry, Ado, may I suggest you keep your comments for the breakout session, and I just use a couple of minutes to see if maybe Caroline would like to say a couple of words about the Voices for Change program, or anyone. Maybe there is any, or whether anyone is familiar with the Voices for Change program and would like to say a few words to discuss how they use mass media to change social norms.
Happy to do so, Ben, and Modupe is also here, and we were together on Voices for Change. I think what was interesting about Voices for Change was we were working to shift harmful norms and market, really sell new positive norms, or not necessarily new ones, as you said, Ben, but ones that some individuals held, but we helped to market. And I think the important part of this is the selling part, is the positivity, which was in the video here, and we learned some lessons quite early on in Voices for Change, where we had a radio drama which was focused on gender-based violence, and each episode had another incident, another form of violence, and this ran for several seasons, and the drama was extremely popular. But what we found at the end of 4 years was that it possibly could have contributed to normalizing gender-based violence, because having the incidents on a weekly basis could have added to that sense of it happens, it's normal, yeah, not great, but it's normal. And a very interesting finding from our final research was where men had seen incidents of violence, even if you were trying to prove that it wasn't a positive behavior, where men had seen incidents of violence, or heard incidents of violence on the radio, they actually led to an increase in violence. However, when they heard talking about or discussing violence, or they saw programs where violence was discussed, then those individuals reduced their violent behavior. So that's I think there's something in there around positivity and actually promoting what does a good look like. A lot of gender-based violence work focus on don't do this and don't be violent and don't act like this, whereas encouraging the new behaviors, people actually need to be able to see what those new behaviors look like. So that's just one thought that I found interesting.
Thank you very much, Caroline. Oops. And I wanted to show you, I think I wanted to show you something that I have in here, but I might just spoil my next slide, so we'll not do it. But it's a very good point. There was one time in West Africa, I think it was the Belgian Corporation. They were trying to reduce rape, and they had put these signs, these posters, with 2 men raping a woman, saying, "We have almost eradicated rape." Now, the problem with that is that, first of all, it makes you think, oh, well, if I can't read, all I'm seeing is 2 women raping a woman, which makes me think, oh, everyone is doing it, right? It's not just one man, one random man, it's 2 men, all the men in the picture. And then on the other hand, if you could read and you hear, "We've almost eradicated," you could also think, oh, I'd better hurry if I want to rape a woman before they eradicate it completely. We have also got quite a bit of evidence suggesting that showing the negative prevalence through mass media of a harmful norm can lead to its increase. So things like, oh, you know, every day there are 10,000 women raped in Nigeria. If we put those posters up, I'm not saying that if someone would never commit rape, that they will be pushed to committing it. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is that those who don't care, those who think that they have the right and the power and to rape a woman, if they think, oh, all these men are going away with it, then seeing a message that, oh, everyone is doing it, they might also be pushed to do it. Okay, I see that there are a few people with their hands raised. I'd like to suggest, like Adenike and Ado, but I'd like to suggest you keep your comments for the breakout session, and where we can discuss experience, positive and negative, with mass media. And you can ask, if you are in a session with Caroline, obviously you can ask her more questions. So Meredith, if you could just send us over, and we will be back in 10 minutes again.
All right, will do. Here we go.
Okay.
Go ahead, Hajira, would you like to speak?
Okay, yeah, for me, lately, I'll talk about the positive impact of the use of mass media in my work, especially kind of dealing with decision makers, and that is the kind of the duty bearers or the stakeholders who are supposed to respond to the needs of the average or the poor and excluded in the communities. Most of the times when advocacies are paid to them, a lot of promises are made, but fulfilling those promises is a challenge. But with the use of social media, mass media, especially radio, televisions, most of them tend to kind of have a change of attitude in responding to some of the demands that are made by people in the community. for me now, what I do is I will do the necessary advocacy, well, community, encourage community to do the necessary advocacy. But once I don't see I don't see kind of a response, the next thing for me has been the use of mass media, and that has worked for me in some cases. In some of my states where I cover, that has brought about kind of infrastructures in the community, which are things that for some cases we have been following for more than 2 years, but involving the use of mass media, these people have begun to respond in some areas. So I think that is the positive I'm taking in terms of how mass media has helped in kind of the work I do. Thank you.
Thank you. Other thoughts and experiences on mass media, and also maybe sort of the types of media you've used? Has it been, radio mostly, or I'm also wondering if anyone's had social media experiences recently.
Yeah, we have used both radio, we have used social medias where community members were trained on how to use Facebook, Twitter to advocate, kind of show pictures, take snapshots of maybe dilapidated structures at their community, tweet it, some they send it on WhatsApp. And there's a community in FCT that got a school built for them, a block of 3 classrooms, through the use of social media. They just snap the dilapidated structure, put it there, and UBEG was able to respond. That the Universal Basic Education in Nigeria was able to respond within a very short period. And the community who had not have school for all their lives were kind of, the school was built for them, a 3 block of classroom. So that has helped.
Very interesting, thank you. Other media experiences that you all had?
From my own perspective, working in this space, for me, I think what really shocked me was how expensive it is to engage mass media to support, behavior change. It's a huge cost, and unfortunately, it's a bit difficult to guarantee that if you spend, hundreds of millions of dollars on a campaign, it will give you the outcome we're looking for. So it's a bit dicey, and it's something that I think really needs a lot of, specialists to guide how the mass media engages people in behavior change. It's not just about putting out ads and campaigns, but also, regularly testing whether you're hitting the right spot in terms of changing norms. Over.
Yeah, thanks. Those are a couple of really important points. One is the cost, and also I think there is a lot of literature on media and social norms change, and it's a little bit mixed. And I think from my reading of it, you kind of see that when it's done correctly, that it can be effective, but it also needs to be supported by some of those strategies. I think that Ben was talking about, others, about the discussion and not just seeing the program, but also incorporating and encouraging community members to talk about the norms to really get action. But I know Nigeria is one of the countries that has had sort of the richest experiences in using media. And, so I'm curious if you have other ideas and thoughts. And also, which medium? Is it television, radio? If any thoughts on in the Nigerian context, what seems to work best?
Rebecca, maybe I could just share from the Purple that in our some interesting points coming out, like more and more use of digital media and mobile technology is being used, particularly even in sort of hard to reach or northern Nigeria. But I do feel that we should really proceed with great caution and a strong reality check on what we're hoping to achieve through social media or through such strategies where there are so few, particularly women and girls, have access to social media, or are you know, there's great social norms against the use of social media by women and girls. And I know that Equal Access have done some really interesting research trying to shift the social norms within families around allowing women and girls to actually have access to and use social media, or just access to the internet. So I think that's really important. And through Purple, we found the most change in attitudes came through radio, and very, very, very limited attitudinal change through digital strategies. We don't exactly know why that was, but particularly around gender-based violence, we're suspecting that there's so much competing, very negative messaging on social media around gender-based violence that your positive promotion was drowned. So it just couldn't compete. But so I think that was interesting. But one other point that I really feel strongly about is that so often as development practitioners, we see what the right thing is to do, and we feel if we just share that you know, it is right, and other people will see that it's right, and so they'll start doing it. But I think what's interesting about the social norms approach, and Ben mentioned it in I think the first or the second example, about where the second example of Ghana, where they aligned the message with what the values were. And I think a really important thing about using media and a social norms approach is really understand what might motivate others to change, and not go with what our perceptions. And it may not be a good, you know, out of a sort of good cause that people might want to change. They may have alternative reasons. It might make you look cool as a young guy, which is not very developmentish. But trying to really get into the mindset of those that you're aiming to influence, and what will resonate with them, I think is really important.
That's a really great point, Caroline, and it brings up a little bit of what we discussed in our last session last month, I guess it was, when we talked about sort of the social norms exploration piece and really understanding what's going on with the folks and working with that you're hoping to change the norms and working with them. I also wanted to say we've also seen with media, especially some more local media, that there are a lot of sort of counter messages that are harmful. You know, so when we've had like Facebook or WhatsApp pages and putting out, and I think that's also an issue of, you know, how do you deal with those competing messages and not amplify the harmful ones?
It's just a few seconds for everyone to come back. Okay, one thing that came up from the group that is critical and important is that the media intervention alone might change attitudes, but it's extremely important that this radio drama, these TV series, these films, these ads, whatever you are pushing, whatever you are projecting in the ether, it's very important that they create space and almost instructions for people to talk about things. So it's not enough to show that people disapprove of the norm of beating women, for instance. It's also very important that the episode, the related episode, ends with questions and conversation topics that people can then take on and discuss. We discussed the example of a Ugandan intervention where people did community cinemas. they episodes were shared, were projected in front of a group of people, and then these people talked about what they had seen. Once again, so that the goal here was to make sure that those who disapproved of the harmful practice now had ground and confidence to speak up and disapprove in front of the others of this harmful practice. Again, so that enough people could see that the harmful practice was disapproved and change injunctive norms around what people approve of and disapprove of in this community. Very important. And we've also discussed obviously the point that Caroline made before of how to avoid actually increasing the belief that the harmful practice is being done by most. The second last example is normative feedback. Normative feedback can be personalized or anonymous. Personalized normative feedback refers to those interventions that actually target individually members of the population, comparing their behavior with the behavior of others. An example of these comes from an intervention on energy consumption. So the problem here was that people were consuming too much energy, and people were sent letters saying, this is how you are performing, this is how much energy you are using compared to your neighbors. What the intervention did was that the descriptive norm, so the belief that, oh, I'm consuming more than my neighbors, pushed those over consumers to consume less and become more efficient. They were thinking, oh, how do all these people do it? I want to do it too. Now, the interventions as it was also achieved the opposite effect. Those who were extremely efficient started relaxing a little bit, right? Because they thought, oh, it's okay. I'm consuming much less than the others. I can let myself go. But they moderated that effect just by adding simple smiley faces to the consumption, so that those who were consuming less had 2 smiley faces and thought, oh, not only I'm the best, I'm consuming less than everyone else, but I am approved for doing so. So the importance, this personalized normative feedback allowed people to consume less if they're consuming more than most, or keep consuming less when they were consuming less than most. Similar interventions I've also tested with petrol consumption. So an example of this is an experiment done in West Africa that one of my students did, where they sent SMS messages to truck drivers who were speeding, telling them, oh, this is how your average speed has compared to others. And they may also made a song about not speeding, and that reduced average speed of truck drivers. And they also used this mixed message, this double message. They told them, you know, you're running faster than most, but they told them, they sent injunctive messages, that is approval messages, where they were being very good at it. So they ranked them and they said, congratulations, you're #1 among all truck drivers in this country. You're the best, or you're the second best. So that truck drivers started desiring becoming the best truck drivers, so that their name will be on top of the ranking, almost like a video game. Sometimes normative feedback can be personalized, as I just said. Other times it can be referring to the group. The second technique of providing normative feedback has been widely tested in universities, particularly in the US, and particularly with the consumption of alcohol. This idea comes from the fact that if you know that everyone else is doing the right thing and you do the wrong thing, you will also have a desire to do the right thing. So this is why you see that message saying 70% of students in this university do not smoke. The idea that I might justify my behavior by saying, oh, everyone does it, is met by the knowledge that actually, no, nobody does this. And this has been tested in many, many different ways. There are endless examples of these on the internet. This was used to target the use of recreational drugs, sexual harassment in US campuses, and so on and so forth. One important learning from these was that actually the closer you can get to your reference group, the more powerful this message will be. And to give you an example of what I mean, I'd like to tell you the story of my colleague who in Amsterdam did some experiment on this. So what he did, he wanted to see how many people were ready to break the law and smoke outside of the smoking areas in the Netherlands. And he noticed that when he put other people smoking in outside of the smoking area in the train station, this was. So when he put more people smoking outside of the smoking area in the train stations, these were his confederates, his other researchers, he noticed that the general public would also follow the new norm. Oh, if everyone is smoking outside of the smoking area, I will also smoke outside of the smoking area. But then what they did, they tried to do the same thing with people dressed in a very particular way, and that is dressed like Gothic goths, so with black dresses, with piercings, with tattoos. And interestingly, what they found was that when the message was, yeah, goths, these people smoke outside of the smoking area, the general public instead went the opposite way. Why? Because they didn't want to be identified with these weird people. So the implications of that for work in Nigeria are massive. If, for instance, you are doing a campaign on female genital cutting, if you say 70% of the population is not practicing female genital cutting, I might believe, oh yeah, but these are not people from my ethnic groups. If anything, if you tell me 70% of the population is not practicing female genital cutting, and you write it in the language of the main ethnic group, and you put a picture of someone who's clearly someone from the main ethnic group, well, I might think, oh, but I'm from the other ethnic group. And I might even practice female genital cutting even more because I don't want to be associated with this ethnic group. So really targeting the language well, the group well, as much similarity as you can between the people among which you'd like to see a shift in norm and the people that you depict in your campaign giving normative feedback is dramatically important. Is there any question on this strategy before we break up for a session sharing, experiencing, seeing this? And I think the next session, Meredith, we could do it a little bit shorter, maybe 6 minutes. Is there any comments on this? Is there any comments on this strategy, on the normative feedback, either personalized, so specific to you compared to others, or generalized, that is specific to what your group is doing? Any clarification point that is required here?
And there's a question in the chat box. Is there evidence of the messaging on drinking alcohol having an impact? Reduced numbers of students drinking?
Yes, the answer is yes, there is evidence. Most of the evidence points to the fact that these had a strong impact. Some evidence says this impact only happened when the reference group was targeted very well. I think once again, it really depends on what else is going on together with the norm shift in terms of alcohol availability, cost of alcohol, general narrative of drinking. But yes, this is most of the evidence points to the fact that this worked. It was some other experiments come also from the environment and the reuse of plastic bags. And that evidence also suggests that when you print on plastic bags, 70%, 70 or whatever, 80% of people reuse these plastic bags at least 2 or 3 times, then people have a tendency to do it. Another example that is very famous comes from reusing towels in hotels. This is very interesting as well. they tested the difference between 3 messages. The first message said, please help us protect the environment, reuse your towel in hotel. The second message said, 80% of customers in this hotel reuse their towel at least once. And the third message said, 80% of customers who went in this room in the same month as you reuse the towel. And the third one was the most effective. So once again, the more similarities people see between themselves and the percentage of people doing the positive thing, the more likely it is that they will also take on the positive behavior. And I see possibly there are more chats.
There's a question. Normative feedback is very interesting and potentially great. We would appreciate more examples.
Yeah, of course, we can send some, and yeah, definitely we will send some. And we're also planning in the early next year. We're planning from these theoretical workshops some more practical seminars, which is where we can discuss case studies in greater detail after we went through this initial conversation. Okay, if there are no comments, then we can split again, and then we will, after the breakout session, we will move to our last strategy, which is also the one that is my favorite because I've seen it applied, which is, and I will not tell you what it is yet. So Meredith, if you want to split us for a shorter breakout session.
Okay, I'm gonna go now. Here we go.
You've ever seen or witnessed anything like that, or even achieving the opposite impact, whether you've ever seen intervention saying, oh, 80% of men beat their wives, or any message of that sort, and how that affected people's behaviors. Or again, any comment at all on this strategy. Maybe one question could be, among the 3 strategies I showed so far, so media conversations, normative feedback, and laws and policies, which one to you has the most appeal in your work? Which one would you pick and why?
I don't want to be talking all the time. I want to fill the
that's
silence.
Fine. Please, yeah.
The use of the strategy in terms of percentage-wise, we definitely employed that in purple, but we weren't able to measure specifically whether that had any impact. I think when it's part of a multi-pronged approach, it's actually very difficult. It's very challenging to measure what's had the impact. In terms of which strategy, I think for Nigeria, I think the media and the third strategy, I can't remember the terminology, media, because Nigeria is a strong oral visual culture, and we're seeing even in recent weeks how the power of the people is so significant, and also the positivity that can be used around media, the reach. It's such a huge country. There's so many different media options if you get the right tool for the right people. And there's energy. There's energy and excitement and positivity, and there's discussion and chat. So I think there's huge scope for the use of media in Nigeria, and this sense of, you know, giving out this message that you're not alone. Actually, a lot of people believe in X, Y, or Z. I think law and policy change, I'm possibly more skeptical because of the big challenge in Nigeria of implementation of laws is so weak. So that's just a thought so that people can happily contradict.
Thank you, Caroline. Any other thoughts? Have you ever witnessed anything like this? Do you agree with Caroline? Anything at all?
Yeah, for me, I think I agree with what she said. The use of mass media and the normative, that is the third one. Yeah, I think it would be good, like us, people love to be known as those on the winning side. So using the normative one where you use percentage of people that have changed attitude towards a common cause will to be very good, to be a very good strategy. I've not used that before. I've already been using that of mass media. So I think it's something for me I look forward to try in 2021 programming. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Hajara. Anyone else? John, I can tell, you're muted.
I'm trying to make a comment around the combination of effects that if we get messages at the population level, get through the mass media, and then the use of statistics to say so many members within the population level are engaged in a positive behavior. Then the combination of that is that at the most of the behaviors we do in health happen at the individual level. So when making a decision, getting to know that, a large number of the population are engaged in a positive behavior, then it tries to bring home the point that when you are left with making decisions at home level, household level, you bring that into it that, you want to join the large number of people who are engaged in positive behavior and do the same thing. This works a lot in child health, and it also works in maternal health. Child health, for instance, if you are taking care of children under 5, and you get to know that the norm is in the use of nets now. A lot of mothers are getting to use nets for their children and for themselves. When it comes to individual level, that when you are left at the household level, then the messages will resonate for you to get to remember that you need to join this population and also use nets and also other child health practices that are desirable at the household level. So it's usually better when it's combined, the population level messaging and referring to large number of people in positive behavior, and then the individual level to take that decision when you are left alone at the household level. Thanks.
Thank you, John. That's a very good point. And one takeaway from this breakout session, important takeaway, is that yes, how do we expand and reflect on these strategies so that we adapt them and we don't follow them blindly, but they become opportunities for us to create. See you in the main. We should be back here. So one important point that we discussed is, we discussed several, but one thing that I want to share is an idea for an intervention that I never implemented, but just to give you an example of how these strategies really point us towards the main concept of making sure people see other people changing. So my idea of an intervention on violence against women was to go at train stations, create huge panels and put one person in front of these panels in charge each panel in front of each panel. So sorry, one person in front of each panel, and then on top, something like we as I don't know, like the people, real men in Abuja never hits their wives, right? So giving a message, an injunctive message, and then stop the people crossing and ask them to sign this panel, so that in a way people coming by could see this signature rising and rising, and then they will see that all these people signed and agree with the message. So it would be slightly different. It wouldn't be a statistic. It wouldn't be like 95% of men in Abuja disapprove of beating their wives, but it would be something more concrete and real. And it would be like, and here's their signatures, right? All the people who signed this panel don't want you to hit your wife, or will disapprove of those who hit their wives, or disapprove of those who don't vaccinate their children, something like that. So this is just to say, all these strategies that we're seeing are there to increase your imagination, not to provide follow step by step, but rather to give you examples of how people in the past have made sure that enough people saw that enough people were changing. Moving on to the last strategy that we're going to look at today. This one is one that has often been carried out in small groups, in communities, and it's really group discussions. This strategy is not only used, very often we romanticize this strategy as being a group of people talking under the tree, but this has been used vastly at school, in offices. I have a wonderful story, if there is time, I'll tell you at the end of the slides, about how group discussions change very harmful masculinity norms on oil extraction platforms. And I'll tell you a little bit more about it later. But first of all, I want to tell you the general ideas behind group discussions. So the idea, group discussions can be very powerful, of course, limited in scope compared to a national media messaging, but they also have the advantage of making sure that people have conversations in their relational, in the space of their relation. So in other words, that while before you see a video and you talk, now you're sitting down and targeting an issue that matters to you, and you're required and asked to change and find solutions for that very issue. Now, this is a model of how these group discussions, it's a 3-step model of how these group discussions can work and achieve social change, social norms change beyond the limit of the group. Usually, these conversations begin by offering opportunities to people to gain or increase or express their motivations to change. The first step is the problematization of the current situation. The NGO Tostan is an NGO that works in West Africa, specifically is a Senegalese NGO. They begin by asking participants to visualize what they want for the future in the village. They might say, well, we want our children to succeed, we want a hospital, we want this and that. And then they discuss, okay, what is stopping you? We want our children to live healthy. What is stopping you from achieving that? And is given knowledge, saying, for instance, are you aware that female genital cutting, lack of vaccination, that these practices are actually stopping you from achieving the goal that you want? And this is where people start separating. That's the third step, the so-called values deliberation, which is a very fancy term. But they start saying, oh, but is female genital cutting our value, or is making sure that our daughters are accepted and in the society where they live in our value? And if the value is the latter, that is, if the value is making sure the daughters are accepted, can we find a new way, a new outcome? Can we create new aspirations for our daughter to be accepted and loved in the society in ways that don't require female genital cutting? And this is where the motivation comes from. The second step then from this group is And sorry, and also in this first step, norms begin to shift in the group, right? So people individually start saying, yes, I want the future, I want a future in which my daughter can be happy, accepted, loved, and in which she doesn't have to go through female genital cutting, because now I've learned the female genital cutting is the cause of all these girls dying. So now, because people express this in the group, now they have other options. Exactly. Thank you very much. That's a beautiful way of putting it. So now that you know that I want this, I know you want this. Now our norms within the group are beginning to shift. So I know that people within this group, they will disapprove of female genital cutting, because what they approve of is a future in which their daughter can achieve whatever female genital cutting is helping them achieve, but without the practice. Now the second step is, oh yeah, obviously the question is, and on the right you see a group of students discussing discussing issues that were relevant to them. This is just to say, this is not just under a tree, this can be done everywhere. So, but this is enough? Of course it's not enough. We need, we just don't need 50 people in a town of 5,000. We need to reach out to the others. As actually, we found that a good ratio is that you need to have 1/10 of the population as a standard, possibly, in these community conversations. And then we also found that a group of 50 is the best. So if you have a village of 500 people, then one group of 50 is great. If you have a village of 1,000 people, then facilitating 2 groups within the village is great, and so on and so forth. So in the second step now, we empower these people who have changed, who have this new renowned motivation, who support each other, to go out to others. One way in which the NGO Tostan does that, and all these pictures are from the NGO Tostan, the copyright Tostan is a little bit difficult to see. One way in which the NGO Tostan does that is through organized diffusion. So as part of the contract to participate in their 3-year program, which also includes obviously very practical hooks, right? So to bring people in, they say, well, we teach you to read, write, and basic maths, which comes after the first year. So the first year, it's all about human rights, health, hygiene. And they say, as part of the contract, or as part of the agreement for participating in this group, you need to promise that you will share everything that you hear with someone that is not participating in these classes after each session. And so you see in the first picture, you see 2 co-wives. Senegal is 95% Muslim, I think, more or less. So 2 co-wives chatting about what the participating woman, the woman who participates in the class, has learned about her health and human rights and the responsibilities that come with rights. So that they start saying, oh, Fatuma or Khadija, I didn't know this. And then Khadija says, oh, I am also different. I see myself as different, and I see you as different, right? This creates the belief that change is possible. You know, I'm not just Khadija, the one who cooks. I'm also Khadija, the one who has something to teach. And that is very powerful. And you're not just, I don't remember her name, but Fatu, who helps me cook. You're also Fatu, who's interested in the health of our children. And then these groups start enacting action. So they come together. In this case, they came together for a set-out, a cleanup of the village. But it's unfortunate because that blue ball actually covers my favorite part of that picture. And what the blue ball covers is another man coming from the back who didn't participate in the classes, who has his pocket in hands, and who's looking very confused to the man who's actually cleaning the village, right? And he's thinking, oh, a man is cleaning the village? That's a woman's role. But by seeing this, you're seeing change. Remember, this is another strategy to make sure that enough people are seeing enough people that change. And then on the lower right-hand side part of the picture, you see a theater that was done within the community. And that is almost like a non-mass, it's a media, right? Theater is a media, but it's specific for the people who, and it's fun. And you see your friend Abdullah, who all of a sudden is doing, or your friend Michael, who all of a sudden is doing this part and everyone laughs, but there is an important message and there is a conversation later on. So that this knowledge and this new understanding are shared. And this group that before it was 50 people, now sees that actually it's 100 people, it's 200 people, it's the whole community who wants to have these conversations. And very often, actually, before I move to the third step, very often these conversations go beyond the limit of a given village. So then effective interventions also integrate strategies to help people reach out to others, to their friends at the market, to their friends at the mosque, to their friends at church. And the same public display of change happened beyond the borders of the community. And then the third step is the sealing of the new reality. And again, this had mixed impact, but very often we found that these events, when they're felt and true and real, have a lot of power to show that actually now this village commits to not practice female genital cutting anymore. And what the NG Tostan has been doing now in recent years, they have improved. It's not just a visible event, they also go to the head of each household in a village that decided spontaneously to declare the abandonment of female genital cutting. And they get the signature of the household of each family, the signature of the village chief, and the signatures are a pledge that is brought to the local police officer. It's very important, however, that there is no push and no pressure on people to achieve these declarations. And this push and pressure can happen because we have committed to the donor that we have this declaration. Why is that important? Because if after this declaration, people keep practicing, then the declaration becomes void. So it's very important that social norms interventions are carried out when the community is ready. This is actually a critical point that we witness elsewhere too. And let me just reiterate it. If you try to change the social norms and you convince some people to expose themselves, and these people are actually bashed down, they are pushed back into the old norm, then the next time is going to be more difficult to convince people to expose themselves, because they'd be like, oh, wait a second. I remember my friend trying to talk about FGC and nobody's speaking to her anymore. Why would I try now today? So this is why such interventions need to be carefully planned, move at the speed of the people themselves, and we need to resist the donor's temptation to say, okay, great, do this in 6 months. At the same time, you need to create a critical mass. While the donor wants to have a national campaign with $100,000, they will probably allow you to do one such intervention in each village in the region of your state. We need to resist that temptation and say, why don't we instead invest $100,000 in this one department? Yes, it will not be national, but it will be effective. I'm sure you have plenty of things to say. So Meredith is going now to send us for our last group conversation, 10 minutes, about this strategy, where we will discuss questions, or we will share effective group discussions or failed group discussions, anything that you'd like to say about the strategy to change social norms. So Meredith, send us away whenever you're ready.
A lot of you have had experience with different models or different forms of this approach. So please go ahead and share what's worked for you, what you found successful, what your questions are about this approach. It is probably the most common one in social norm shifting, other than mass media. Everyone is being very quiet, very shy. I know there's, as we've discussed a lot of times, these different strategies are used together. You might have media, and then you might have your small group discussions as well. Would anyone like to share an example of sort of these community dialogues and discussion? So let me share, for as y'all are mulling this over, let me share, or I just want to reflect on some of the different ways that this strategy plays out. So sometimes there's an example from work that Save the Children has done in other countries that does do sort of this strategy is often implemented in youth clubs or like after school clubs, or sometimes we try to do it within schools as well, although that can be more challenging because of the type of facilitation and the space that's available within schools. But an example of a program that's fairly well known, especially, I'm not sure if any of my SAVE colleagues are on the line here, but in Nepal, and it's now been, I think it's being implemented in Nigeria as well, a program called Choices, which brings young adolescents, 10 to 14-year-old, together in after-school clubs, facilitated by club leaders in mixed groups, where they sort of go through these different steps. It doesn't look at all the same as the Tostan example, but it is the same process of, problematizing, kind of helping people become aware of the norms that they live in that they may not be aware of, and then talking about it together and making some kind of pledges for change. So that's there's a lot of the literature talks about safe spaces and developing safe spaces to do this, and it's used quite a bit with adolescents. And also the sort of the pledge component, for example, the Real Fathers intervention in Uganda. It was a fatherhood mentoring program, so there was a household visit component where peer mentors went to talk to young fathers about the goal of it was to prevent violence against children and violence against women. But in addition to that sort of skills building kind of individual mentoring piece, there were monthly group sessions where the mentors brought together all of their mentees in a group meeting so people could discuss norms, behaviors, alternative ways of acting. And then there would be a wall board or a poster or a billboard that was unveiled with some messages, and then people would discuss those and sign a pledge on those that they were going to change their behavior. So the pledging, the testimonies, the reflection, those are all sort of critical pieces of norms interventions. And
I want to share it.
Please go ahead, Hajara. Yeah.
Okay, I wanted to share a similar kind of we have the women peer education groups that are instituted in most of communities where we work. So they kind of have a manual that are used in each of their sections, kind of varies on different topics, talks about politics, talks about values, sexual, gender-based violence, different topics are being covered in the manual. And women kind of, in a group of 20, kind of meet on a weekly. It's left for them. Do they want to meet weekly or twice a month? So they decide the number of times they meet per month. And through this the women peer education group, women were able to kind of itemize issues that are of importance and kind of things that they really want to change in their communities. And this has brought out, like in a particular community where issues of school, as in enrollment, was the case. But right now, every child of school age in that community, with the support of also the CDC, that is Community Development Committees, that was instituted by ActionAid. And once a child is of school age, the child is now being enrolled and retained within those communities. And this was able to, this change came about through the women peer education, kind of building their capacity. What was the importance of education? What's kind of the importance of maybe taking the rest after work, building on their own values and self-esteem. So those group discussions has really helped in kind of change of attitudes and norms even within the communities. Because like in northern Nigeria, sometimes issues of girl education is a kind of difficult things, but with the use of the women peer group, we have been able to achieve that. So using those focal group the same to during projects or programs has really helped in kind of change of attitudes. Some have been kind of even giving the law on punishment on people that kind of violate girls or women within the communities in terms of gender-based violence. Some of the communities can be able to kind of put community laws on what will be done on whoever is a violator or a rapist within their communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Those are great examples. Would anyone else like to share an example? And I sort of want to note that this approach is also used for not just sort of gender-based violence or gender-related kind of interventions, but it's also used for family planning, for child health, for immunization. So it can be used for other behaviors as well, although it's very predominantly known in the sort of violence prevention world.
Yeah, you're very right. Yeah.
So hello. So just to add to what you just said, we've also used this approach in sort of addressing the behavior of healthcare workers towards documentation to improve data quality in our organization. So we are currently working on a project with support from the MGF to actually conduct a study to identify what are the key drivers of data falsification at health facility level. And one of the key approach we adopted was to have health facility staff in the group discussion at the local government level to actually brainstorm on what the problems are and how, using an HCD approach, how these problems can be solved. It was a very good tool that we used, and part of the things that we got from that group discussion was we identified some key healthcare workers who are passionate about data, who will improve their knowledge on data quality and what to do at the health facility, and they are now key peer educators. They go to different health facilities to mentor their colleagues on how to improve data quality. It's a new project that we started, and we'll start seeing some of the product results. Probably going for, maybe in future, we'll be able to share some of the success stories from this intervention. Thank you, and over.
Thank you, Adam. That's fascinating to think about the application to that area of work. Could you repeat again what organization you're with? I missed that.
So I work with Afinet, African Field.
Oh, with Afinet. Okay, thank you. We only have a couple more seconds. I just wanted to raise a few things to think about. Sometimes the challenge in this kind of intervention is facilitation, having good facilitation, how to do this at scale, how to diffuse these discussions more broadly. So those are all things we can be thinking about as we move forward. I think, any last comment? We have just a few more seconds in our group.
Yeah, using group discussion, focus group discussion, sometimes ability to control the crowd, as in to have control over the people, in a
Okay, welcome back, everyone. One point that we should make before moving forward is on the importance of understanding community readiness to change. And ideally, we discussed the possibility of assessing community readiness at your baseline and understanding when communities are ready to move forward so that you don't expose people to risk. And also another important point is how achieving systemic change requires collaboration across partners, right? And something that I'd like to tell you that I hadn't thought of before is that one way in which the NGO Tostan, which is the case study that was bringing, facilitates collaboration across partners, is that they help community leaders and political leaders have transformative conversations with participants, so that when participants come to the community leader has an opportunity to jump on the wave of change, to increase their standing within the community and become the champions of change, now that they see that most people are changing. I know your conversations are yielding an extreme amount of very interesting things, but as I said, we will have time in the future to pick case studies and discuss them. Okay, now a few points I'd like to discuss, and specifically the fact that strategies can be mixed, right? Now, we presented these 4 strategies as if they were standing alone, but really group discussions can be mixed with media campaigns. And we mentioned before the example of the Uganda group, who did show the film and then asked people to discuss. At the same time, how can we choose a strategy? How do we choose which strategy to do? Well, here's a possible guideline that we are still testing. It's not like the dogma, but maybe it could be helpful. It could be helpful. So if norms are a misrepresentation of reality, so if people believe, oh, everyone is corrupted around here, but it's only 10%, or everyone is practicing child marriage, but it's only 20%, then normative feedback might be the best. Putting signs saying, actually, 90% of people are not corrupted, 90% of people hate corruptions. If norms are active in a very specific group, then group discussions might be more important. So if you take female genital cutting binds people tends to bind people across groups who are in the same marriage network. And that's where group discussion might be helpful. If it's a norm that is out there in society, in the ethos, then maybe mass media might be more helpful. If there is only one active norm, so for instance, if you take the example of vaccinating children, sorry, I do examples from health because that's what I'm familiar with, working in public health. Well, if people do not vaccinate their children because they think they will be disapproved for vaccinating children, then normative feedback might be a little bit better. If there are multiple norms, so for instance, women are not working outside of the household because they're considered less important, because there is the belief that they will do so to cheat their husband, because there is the belief that women should take care of the household, because there's a belief that men are not capable of taking care of the children, then group discussions paired with mass media, if you can't do both, either or, might be the best strategy. And then finally, a reflection on who do we want to work with? And we shouldn't just be working with, the question is, should we work with those exhibiting the behavior, or should we be working with their reference group? And obviously there is no solution to this. But as we said in our group, one finding that we found changing gender, facilitating an intervention to change gender norms around girls' mobility in Northern India, was that actually the best people to work with in terms of household in a given community is the people who are on the edge of changing, not the people who are already convinced. They might be the voices that you want to amplify with a media campaign, not the people who are absolutely convinced that, I don't know, women working outside of the household is absolute nonsense, because they will be the last one to change. But those who say, yeah, maybe in another world I would do it, I can see the advantages. Those are the people who you might want to work with, because by working with them, you will see the convinced one that will jump on the opportunity. And then the ones who are not convinced, they will eventually join the bandwagon, because most people are changing. So in a way, that will help change occur beyond the target group. And of course, a final reminder that changing social norms needs to occur as you strategize or collaborate with other actors to change other factors that are hampering the uptake of the positive practice. So what are the key takeaways? Change happens when people see enough other people changing. It takes longer to achieve change with stronger social norms. We discussed 4 norms change strategies: laws and policies, mass media, normative feedback, and group discussion. And then obviously, very importantly, that not only these strategies can be mixed, but also that these strategies are just examples to unleash your imagination of how can I make sure, how can I create, because in the end, that's what really we're doing. How can I create a civil movement, a people-led movement to change, in which we amplify the voice of those who are unhappy with the harmful practice and want to push forward positive change within our society. So this is really the end. We have not 5 minutes, I would say maybe, yeah, 3 questions and clarifications or comments. I don't know if there is anyone who has question and comments, like final question or comments on the whole session. Otherwise, I'll move forward to the last slide. Okay, we've been together for 2 hours. Maybe it is time to move forward to the last slide. So this really is the end of this, I understand, very introductory discussion on intervention that can change social norms. In preparation for the next webinar, we'd like for you to reflect a little bit on what we discussed today. Think about an intervention, not necessarily a health intervention. Once again, that's my bias, but an intervention that you have seen, witnessed, heard of, or created in the past. And we would like to ask you, within that intervention, which of these 4 strategies would you attach to that intervention to achieve change in social norms? How, and possibly why? So maybe it was an intervention on vaccination, and you say, oh, I'd like to have group discussions, or personalized normative feedback. Maybe it was an intervention on corruption. Maybe it was one on traffic accidents. Whatever that is, just think, oh, this is a strategy that will go very well with that intervention, and this is what I could do. Nothing too specific, but just for you to think of how to strengthen the discussion that we had in this very interesting 2 hours, for which I thank you very much. This is the end, and Meredith, I think back to you.